At long last, season number 2 of the Kansas Dynasty is finally here, and we'll be starting things off at home, here at the booth, against the reigning runners-up of the Mountain West, the Fresno State Bulldogs. It's going to be a very different feel without our legendary senior class from last year. No more Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, Kobe Bryant, Marvin Grant, Luke Grimm, and everybody else who helped lead this team to an appearance in the national championship. In the last episode, I talked about how I plan on doing 2 games per episode most times around going forward. And while that normally will be the case, that will not be to start the year, and there is a reason for this. Earlier today on the YouTube community tab, I posted about the glitches within the Broncos draft class. So basically, I'm going to have to remake the entire draft class, which is not going to be fun. Pray for me. But in other words, that's obviously going to take up a lot of time over the next week or so as I look to get that done fairly quickly. So because of that, I'm going to have to spend a little less time on my regular content, including here. So what we're going to do is today we will go through this game against Fresno State. We'll go through the other games across the country. Then next episode, we'll play the game against Missouri. We'll go through the other games across the country. Then we'll cover the recruiting special, which I dove deeper into in the last episode. And then I think at that point, by the time we get to the Clemson game and then Big 12 play, the draft class for the Broncos series should be done. Broncos upload should be back. And then from there, we'll be doing 2 games per episode again. So our matchup with Fresno State, interestingly, is in week 0. We do not play in week 1, however, but we will cover both weeks in this episode. And there are some big games in week 1. Miami versus Oklahoma, Utah versus Oregon, Ole Miss versus USC, LSU versus Clemson. I'm certainly missing a couple, but we'll cover all of the main attractions later in the episode. But first, I do want to start things off with recruiting real quick. So we do have an extra spot on the board with 1 prospect locking us out. We'll be putting on safety Kenya Ankara. He's a top 200 player. His only scholarships are from Tulane and Rice. So I think if we can get in this battle, we can make some noise. And while he's unfortunately a bust, I do think he looks like a pretty good player. And again, we'll really dive deep into a lot of these guys in the recruiting special, which will be pretty soon. But for now, this is how we're going to utilize our points. Really prioritizing these top quarterbacks, Rambo, Pollard, and Chosen. We're also really prioritizing some of these receivers who, if you remember, do not have initial interest in us, but I really want them. Amani Law, Josh Lawton, and Rajon Jones. We're going to give them 50 recruiting hours each to try to put ourselves in the battle. For pretty much everybody else, we're actually quite high on their list just by scouting and giving them a scholarship. And then we will talk about how we're going to use our points in week 1 later in the episode. But first, we've got to reveal the depth chart, specifically who will be the starting quarterback. Will it be Ben Easters, Isaiah Marshall, or Clyde Poole? So all 3 of these guys are going to play. They're all going to have a role this year because they all bring different things to the table. Ben Easters is the best pure passer. I think he raises the floor. Isaiah Marshall has the arm talent. He's athletic, but he's not overly accurate. And then Clyde Poole is a complete freak show. He's the most dynamic of the group as a runner. He's got the arm talent. He's pretty accurate as well. He just does not consistently go through his progressions and often makes bad reads. So the plan is that Ben Easters will start, but that doesn't mean he'll play the whole game. We're kind of going to roll with the hot hand in a sense. We're not necessarily going to have a consistent rotation or go by committee, but it's going to be if Ben Easters is playing well, we'll keep him in. If he's not playing so well, then we'll replace him after a few drives. There's a number of other position battles we'll be looking at, such as running back and wide receiver. Mario Maddox, for instance, is somebody who I think is going to be on the field, but we've got to figure out if we want to redshirt a lot of these recently recruited players. Isaiah Lamore and Seth Jennings are 2 guys I'm confident won't be redshirted because I think they'll have big seasons. But otherwise, pretty much all of our freshmen or recently recruited players, in the case of Maddox, will probably be redshirted, but we can still use them in 4 games. Devontae Crispin's going to be another tough decision. I want to potentially use him in our linebacking core with Jason Gilliam, Samuel Mpemba, J.B. Brown, and of course, Damani Maxson. But these freshmen are going to have to play well if they don't want to be redshirted. As for cornerback, Caleb Purdy will stay in the slot, so for now, Basil Wilson will start on the outside of Avante Dickerson, but we may give other guys some looks as well. I think outside of offensive line and safety, pretty much every position on this roster is up for grabs. There is so much turmoil here, and it's going to be very fascinating to see how things go. And we've got to get started on the right foot because we have a really tough schedule. And that includes Fresno State, who won 8 games last year. We saw them in the Mountain West Championship. They were competitive for most of the game, but got ran over by Ashton Genty and Boise State. Now, they've lost a lot of talent. Their top receiver, Jalen Moss, in the portal to USC. Corey Foreman, their best defensive player, in the portal to Oregon. Their lead running back, Malik Sherrod, has graduated, and the highest-rated player on their roster, quarterback Mikey Keene, he returns, but he's not going to play this year because of a pectoral injury he suffered late last year that he has not recovered from seemingly at all. So he's going to be out for most of the year, and the redshirt sophomore, Jaden Mandel, will start in his place. Mandel started at the end of last year when Keene got hurt. He was the starter in the Mountain West Championship game, and we saw the ups and downs with him. Devin Rivers and Michael Allen will lead the running back by committee, and they're going to be calling on an intriguing group of receivers to replace the production from some of their veteran players, including Jalen Moss, who's expected to have a big role at USC. Like us, Fresno State lost a lot of their best players, so they're going to be figuring some things out. It might be an ugly game from both sides, but we're looking to get this season started off with a win, and we can't really afford to lose this game because Fresno State is the only non-Power 4 school on our schedule. Our other 2 non-conference games are against Missouri and Clemson on the road, and then obviously Big 12 play won't be easy with a much harder in-conference slate than last year. So let's take a look at Ben Easters. The redshirt senior had a terrific offseason, a big reason why he has technically won the starting job, but he has to play well today if he wants to stay in the game as Morrison fumbles, and it's quickly scooped up by Kobe Baines. The play would be reviewed and reversed, but still, a fascinating start. On the first play of scrimmage, it's a near turnover. 3rd and 8, Easters looks to throw it looking short. It's caught by Moody Rubin, the transfer from Stanford, and he is just shy of the yard to gain. A 3 and out for the Kansas offense to start the day, and that'll result in a punt as we take our first look at the Kansas defense, who, like the offense, is losing a lot of key seniors, particularly in the secondary. After a holding, it's 2nd and long as Devon Rivers loses yardage. Damani Maxson brings him down, and Maxson goes from the young freshman to a guy who's going to have a big season, being one of the key returners. Up the middle, broken up, incomplete by Basil Wilson, the sophomore corner who did not have a role on the team last year. Now he becomes a starter. Kansas back with it, 2nd and 10. Savion Morrison joins Easters in the backfield. He's going to look to scramble with it, and Ben Easters runs for 11 and a first down. Of the 3 quarterbacks, he is not the runner of the group. I'm surprised to see that play work. Here's Morrison to the left side, outruns the defender, and brings it inside the 30. We're very much going to be a running back by committee, but I think Morrison's going to be the leader of the group as Easters is sacked. It's Tim Thomas, the linebacker, off the blitz, flying into the backfield, and now it's a 3rd and 9. Easters on the play action. He will throw it away under more pressure. The offensive line doesn't look too good so far, and that'll bring out the field goal team. 44-yarder for Owen Piper-Gerdes. His kick is no good. It's wide left, and it was a little short as well. So Kansas remains off the board as Piper-Gerdes misses the kick, and we remain scoreless. Piper-Gerdes started the season last year off pretty rocky, but he played well down the stretch, and with freshman Anthony Escalante on the roster, Owen's going to have to play well, otherwise we will burn the red shirt on Escalante and use him. Up the middle, nice throw by Mandel, and a huge gain for Fresno State. Kareem McCoon II gets 33. One of the many receivers who's going to have to step up with the loss of Jalen Moss. Hey, that rhymed. Up the middle, a nice run for Devon Rivers as he gets it near the red zone, and Fresno State's offense appears to be in business here. 3rd and 3, back to Rivers. Jukes away from the defender, inside the 10 to around the 7. The Bulldogs running it well. Their offense looks really efficient on this drive as they look to punch it in. 1st and goal. It's the other running back, Michael Allen, and he will waltz his way in for a touchdown, and Fresno State gets the scoring started. They will take a 7-0 lead. 2 drives, 0 points for the offense, hoping drive number 3 goes better. Off play action, Easters tries to run with it again. This time he's not quite as successful. Sacked on the play by a couple defenders, Jacob Holmes and Dejan Lafferty, as it's 3rd and 7. Quick throw for the freshman. Isaiah Lamore, the 4-star tight end, won the job, and he gets his first catch as a Jayhawk. To the left side, Morrison loses a couple, and that'll wrap up the first quarter off the TFL by Jamarion Briggs. A 7-0 lead for Fresno State. Our offenses look pretty stagnant so far. On one hand, Ben Easters hasn't been bad per se. He's been fairly efficient. He's raised the floor of the offense, if you will, but he hasn't really raised the ceiling. We haven't seen the big plays out of him, and that's the issue with him. On second down, Easters will dump it off for Jaden Ham. Look at all that space for the backup tight end. This crowd is going ham. I'm going to make that joke way too many times, and it will not get old. 2nd and 10, play action. Easters under pressure. He is sacked for a loss of around 9. So far, the offensive line has been pretty bad. Easters hasn't done well under pressure, but it's not entirely his fault, as he has to throw out of the sack on the screen. And now it's 4th and 19. Field goal try for Piper Gerties is no good again. Wide right this time. Owen Piper Gerties starts his season 0 for 2. Both kicks were close, but it doesn't matter if they're close. A miss is a miss at the end of the day. And it remains 7-0. In the 3 drives with Ben Easters, the team has scored 0 points. It's not really his fault. There should be 6 on the board. But, again, has the ceiling really been raised? Mandel has to throw out of the sack. There's a flag on the play. I think it's going to be a holding call against Fresno State, so Kansas will decline the penalty. They'll take the punt. And with the offense, there's going to be a new quarterback on the field. As I kind of said earlier, we're going to play the hot hand. I want to take this game in 3-drive increments. We've seen 3 drives from Easters, and he's been fine. He hasn't been bad, but he hasn't been good either. And there's 0 points on the board, and much of that is not his fault. But I want to see what Isaiah Marshall can do. Will the offense look a little bit more cohesive with Marshall out there? Because even though we should have 6 points on the board, it's not like any of those 3 drives were all that spectacular. He connects with Mario Maddox, who gets it past the 50 for his first reception as a Jayhawk. One of the top receivers at the JUCO level last year. Maddox is a player I have very high hopes for, as here is Sevion Morrison. Whoop! Nice little juke move. He gets it to the 30. Morrison is a big physical runner who's at his best between the tackles, but we'll look to utilize him in space when we can. 3rd and 2. Short throw is caught by a wide-open Mario Maddox for the first down. Seems like these two guys have a pretty good rapport with each other here on this first drive. And Kansas has it inside the 10, their best drive of the day. Marshall scrambles to the left, looks to run with it. A strong run by Isaiah Marshall. He gets it to around the 2. And so that'll make it a 1st and goal. Funky formation up the middle. Daniel Highshaw Jr. scores the first touchdown of the year. So with Isaiah Marshall in the game, the offense drives down the field and scores a touchdown. Now, it's not like Marshall did anything spectacular on that drive, but he was efficient. He made all of his throws. He had the nice scramble. No super big plays, but the offense looked their best on that possession with Marshall in the game. A good first impression. We're tied at 7 and a big play behind the line of scrimmage. I think that was DJ Withers with the TFL, the senior defensive tackle. And so that'll make it a 2nd and 12. Play action. Mandel looks to throw it. Under pressure, he's sacked. Trevion Ford, the transfer from Toledo, leads the way, and he's joined by Dakaias Brinkley, the sophomore looking for a big season after his great freshman campaign. Rivers doesn't get much on 3rd down as the offense returns with another new quarterback. This is Isaiah Marshall's drive, but we're going to give Clyde Poole the occasional snap, even with the other guys in the game, as he gets 7. Poole is too explosive and athletic not to give some design touches to as a runner. Here's Johnny Thompson Jr. to the outside. Whoop! Jukes away from multiple defenders for a huge gain. His first carry of the year goes for 23. Thompson had a huge offseason, putting him in the committee with Highshaw and Morrison as Daniel Highshaw powers his way in. 2 carries and 2 touchdowns today for Daniel Highshaw Jr., and we're now 2 for 2 with touchdown drives with Isaiah Marshall in the game. Albeit, he really doesn't deserve any credit for this one. He threw a whopping 0 passes and ran it 0 times on this drive. But the offense still looked good. There's also no denying that. And that'll wrap up the first half. A 14-7 lead here for Kansas. I expected it to be kind of an ugly game, and it has been. But we might have something with Isaiah Marshall, who hasn't made any spectacular throws. but the offenses look good with him at quarterback. I think defensively we've held up pretty well too. The pass rush has been solid. The coverage has been pretty good. Mandel's only completed 2 passes. And the run defense has been pretty solid as well. So even though the score doesn't look all that great and the offense hasn't been all that spectacular, for the most part, it really hasn't been that bad of a first half. And I'm excited to see more Isaiah Marshall into the second half, see if the offense asks a little bit more out of him. As on 1st and 10, it's Rivers. He's got blocks to the left side. And a big run for Devon Rivers, wrapped up by Wilson along with Javon McIntyre, the transfer from Pitt, who will play the Marvin Grant role. Mandel on play action. He's going to run with it and somehow gets 9. That should have been a loss of about 4. Damani Maxson read the play perfectly, but he went after the running back. Then there's 4 guys in the backfield. None of them bring down the quarterback. And then on 3rd down, look at Rivers. Down the field, into the red zone, past the 20. And we had a guy touch him behind the line of scrimmage. He turned it into a huge gain. But there's a flag, and we just dodged a bullet. Holding on Chuck Montgomery, and the holding happened after the first down, but it was close enough to the line of scrimmage to where the first down is called back, and it's now a 3rd and 4. Mandel looks to throw it to the right side. It's broken up. Basil Wilson has had a pretty good game at corner. He's made some nice plays. That'll force a punt, and the Jayhawks get it back. Big drive for Isaiah Marshall is on 2nd and 3. He'll roll out to the right, and he'll look to run with it. As he's out of bounds past the 50. Late hit, maybe should have been a flag. But the Isaiah Marshall experiment continues to go well, even though, again, he hasn't needed to make any big throws. The true freshman, Jazir Tolbert's first carry as a Kansas Jayhawk, goes for a loss of 3. Still a guy I'm excited about, and that play really wasn't his fault. 2nd and 13, Marshall under pressure, tries to get some space to throw it away, but he cannot. The defenders outrun him, and it's a sack. That'll make it a 3rd and long. The pressure led by Demarion White as Marshall looks to throw it. Has time. He's going to run with it up the middle with nobody open, and he gets a decent gain. But it's 4th and 17, and Kansas will punt it away. But overall, a pretty good 3-drive sequence for Marshall. He wasn't perfect, but 14 points. That looks pretty good. As Michael Allen runs for the first down, the Fresno State offense continuing to look fairly efficient on the ground, but they're not getting much out of the passing game. Jaden Mandel has 3 completions today. Here is Devon Rivers with a nice run to the left. He gets a first down past the 30. And late here in the 3rd quarter, Fresno State's moving it well. It looks like they will not get another playoff. And that'll wrap up quarter number 3. No score change in this one. It's 14-7 still going into the 4th. But Fresno State is marching on the doorstep. This game is far from over. And if Fresno State can get the pass game working, you never know. Their offense could be in business. Jaden Mandel has been mostly a non-factor, though. To start the 4th, 3rd and 1. Mandel under pressure for the end zone with a dot. And this game is tied up. It's hauled in by Nathan Acevedo, the number 1 receiver on the depth chart with his first catch of the game. Avante Dickerson, the transfer from fellow former Mountain West program, Utah State, has done a good job with him in coverage, but I guess not that time. Clyde Poole back in the game at quarterback with a juke move and more. A huge run for Poole as he gets 23. And again, this is why we're so excited about him as he gains 26. The most athletic player on the field. Isaiah Marshall is still playing quarterback. He's done enough over those 3 drives to remain on the field. But again, we're going to continue to get Clyde Poole some run. Here's Jazir Tolbert to the outside. A big conversion on 3rd down. Good to see Tolbert, the freshman from Overland Park, not too far away from here in Lawrence, as it's a screen on 1st down. Moody Rubin with some room, and the Stanford transfer has it inside the 20. The offense continuing to look efficient with Marshall under center as it's a play action on 2nd down. He'll go short for an open Mario Maddox, and he gets the first down inside the 10. Marshall, 8 of 9 with 63 yards. 5 of his passes have been caught by Maddox. 3rd and goal. Marshall under pressure, looking for the end zone. It's broken up, incomplete. Fresno State with the stop. That was the wrong read. We have the flag on the play, but I don't think it'll really matter. It's a holding against James Livingston, making his first career start at right tackle. And that will be declined, of course, and that'll bring out the field goal unit. Piper Gertie's 0 for 2. Gotta make this one, and it squeaks through. So Kansas takes the lead, 17-14. Still plenty of time here in the 4th quarter with 6 and change as Fresno State gets it back. Hand off for Rivers, and he loses a couple. Devontae Crispin, the highest-ranked player from the state of Kansas in this year's freshman class, brings him down, and I've been impressed with Crispin. I think he's had a nice game. 2nd and 11, up the middle, the tight end, Cameron Beecham with the first down. That's Avante Dickerson in coverage, and a nice play there for the Bulldogs. 3rd and 3, back to Rivers. Breaks the tackle by DJ Withers, and he gets the first down. Fresno State has it past the 50. They're moving it pretty well. 2nd and 7, play action, Mandel under pressure. He will connect, and a big play to the 30. The redshirt freshman Samir Arrington with his first reception. Just over 2.5 minutes to go. Fresno State only down by 3. Up the middle, another first down into the red zone. It's Kareem McCoon who makes the grab. Following play, nearing the 2-minute warning, there is a flag down as it's a jet sweep. Back to McCoon. He gets a solid gain, but I think this one's going to be coming back. Well, this could be a pivotal holding call against Fresno State because it could knock them out of field goal range. You never know with college kickers. Marcus Simeon, the right tackle, no relations to the baseball player, is the one called for the penalty. On 2nd and 18, Mandel on the run, fires for McCoon. He was under a ton of pressure. That should have been a sack. I think the pass rush has been good, but they're not bringing down the quarterback. 3rd and inches, Mandel for the end zone. It's a touchdown. Fresno State takes the lead. Nathan Acevedo with the score. 21-17. The Bulldogs are up top late in the 4th. What a drive by Jaden Mandel, who struggled for most of this game. But here in this 4th quarter, when his team needed him, he has delivered. With 1:17 and a 4-point deficit, we'll stick with Isaiah Marshall at quarterback. He hasn't been perfect, but he's done enough to earn the opportunity to play out this drive, and he starts with a nice run to the right side. Out of bounds at the 45. I've been impressed with Marshall as a runner. He's made some nice plays. Field goal does nothing. We need to drive the full length of the field. 55 yards as Clyde Poole is back in, and he loses a yard. Fresno State this time reads the play, and that'll make it a 2nd and 11. Marshall looks to throw it under pressure. Up the middle, another good run. Nearly gets the first down, and Kansas will use their first timeout. I wanted to hold on to the timeouts as long as I could. With that clock being under 50 seconds, we're going to have to start using them. 3rd and 2, it's incomplete for Isaiah Lamore, and the game comes down to this. 4th and 2, ball game on the line for Kansas. It's Johnny Thompson, and he will get the first down, wrapped up around the 42-yard line, and the game stays alive a little bit longer. Following play, Marshall scrambles to the right, looks to throw it. He's picked! The true freshman, Charlie Lanovoy, with the interception, and Fresno State comes into Lawrence and knocks off the Jayhawks 21-17. It's Charlie Lanovoy, the true freshman in his first collegiate game, who wins it for the Bulldogs. I really don't think it was that bad of a read by Isaiah Marshall. The receiver was open. There were 2 defenders in between him, but I think there was enough space for him to make that throw. It was just a terrific defensive play by Lanovoy to get to the ball quickly, make a play on it to end this game. Fresno State's going to kneel out the clock, and since we only have 2 timeouts, we're not going to bother to use them. And that'll do it! Fresno State upsets Kansas 21-17. Look, we knew it was going to be a rebuilding year with well over half of our starting lineup and pretty much all of our star players from last year graduating and many of them entering the NFL. We knew this was going to be a rebuilding year. We knew it was going to be an adjustment year. But losing to the only non-power conference team on our schedule is unacceptable because, like us, Fresno State lost a lot of key players. Their quarterback is hurt. Their best running back is gone. Their top receiver is gone. Many of their key defensive players are gone. They are dealing with the same things that we are, but they came into our house and beat us. The quarterback play wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. That's the problem. I think the drives with Isaiah Marshall were pretty solid. In the 5 possessions he was in, we scored 17 points. But it's not like Marshall was spectacular. Him and Ben Easters, I thought, played pretty even games. They were both okay. Neither were bad, but neither were great. I definitely wish we got Clyde Poole some throws, but by the time we got late in the game, I felt like we just had to stick with Marshall because I didn't want to throw the true freshman into the fire. But we're definitely going to utilize Clyde Poole as a passer week 2 against Missouri. He's going to play a lot in that game because I think he has the highest ceiling of the group, and that's what we missed today. I thought we ran the ball okay. It wasn't spectacular, but it wasn't bad either. We got a lot of guys involved, as I had planned, and a lot of guys were pretty solid. Morrison was pretty good. Thompson was pretty good. Poole and Marshall both effective on the ground. Mario Maddox was actually our leading receiver. I still want to redshirt him because I think he's going to be really good in a year or two. But if Isaiah Marshall wins the job, we might need to burn the red shirt for Maddox because he was so important when Marshall was in the game. Nobody else was really impressive. I was really disappointed by Joseph Manjack, the Houston transfer. He's our number 1 receiver. He did not get a single catch today. He's got to be better. And then defensively, we were good through 3 quarters, but we choked it. At the end, I thought the coverage was terrific for most of the game until the end. And then Owen Piper-Gerdy's missing 2 field goals. If those kicks go in, we probably win this game. As for Fresno State, Jaden Mandel was horrible for 3 quarters and then looked unbelievable in the 4th. And again, our defense was good early, but they weren't good down the stretch. The run game was solid for Fresno State, and I think the defense was really good. Another thing I want to point out about our defense was the pass rush was up and down. They had a lot more sacks than we did. I think they had 4, maybe 5. But we sent just as much pressure as they did. The problem is we only came home with 1 sack. We had a lot of defensive linemen in the backfield, but they had a hard time bringing down Jaden Mandel for whatever reason. And if we come home with some of those sacks, again, we probably win the game. So an unfortunate loss here as we simulate through week 0. We'll start with recruiting and then talk about the games across the country. So a lot of guys are narrowing their lists down, and we are very high up for a lot of these guys. First or second for most of these players. We're in first place for all of the big quarterbacks, including Enrique Rambo, the 5-star. The other 2 5-stars, Sean Snead and Quantavius Landers, were also in first place for, as DJ Withers wins the conference's Defensive Player of the Week, and Daniel Highshaw, who had 4 yards, wins the Offensive Player of the Week. We're still ranked at number 10, but that'll certainly go down after week 1. With another player locking us out, we're going to add J.J. Addington to the board and give him a scholarship. He's already interested in us, and we're already pretty high on his list. So something I want to keep an eye on with visits is we don't play a lot of home games, at least early in the year. We will not be at home again until week 7, and the only time from now to then that we can schedule visits is week 3, our bye week. So because of that, I want to put a lot of points into guys who I think will narrow their lists down to 5 next week, including Sean Pullard and Kerry Chosen, the 2 quarterbacks. Even though Rambo is ranked higher, I think Pullard and Chosen are more likely to narrow their lists sooner. And the reason for that is that next week, week 2, will be our last opportunity to offer visits to guys to come on the campus week 3, because we can only schedule visits at least 1 week in advance. So we need as many players as possible to be narrowed down to 5. That way we can get them onto campus for visits in week 3. And then from there, we're just going to have to hope to be lucky with other guys, maybe not need visits for some of them, and for others, hope that the battles last long enough for us to have them come in week 7 against Utah. Sean Snead, Santiago Herrera, and Quantavius Landers are 3 other guys who we're putting a lot more points into than we would be otherwise. Alexander Finger is another, because I think there's a chance a lot of those guys narrow their list down to 5. And our plan kind of worked for the most part as we dropped to 21. Sean Pullard, Kerry Chosen, Santiago Herrera, and Alexander Finger are down to 5. So with the 6 or 7 guys who I put an extra focus on, 4 of them are down to 5, and they will all visit the campus during our week 3 bye week. So with that, let's take a look at weeks 0 and 1 across the country. We'll start with week 0. Not a large quantity of games, but the most noteworthy one is Georgia Southern upsetting USC 28-17. And for that, I would like to say thank you, Georgia Southern, for not making us look like the biggest loser of week 0. Because Georgia Southern is a worse team than Fresno State, and USC has higher expectations than we do, given the huge offseason for them in the portal and the huge steps in development for Miller Moss, who's supposed to be a high draft pick next year, given his terrific offseason. The Fresno State transfer, Jalen Moss, played well, scored a touchdown, but it wasn't enough. Notre Dame squeaks by Syracuse. Steve Angeli, the quarterback, picked off 3 times. Ohio State beats UConn in a game that's closer than it should have been. Illinois beats Old Dominion, and Stanford loses to Hawaii. Another upset as we look at our players of the week. Julian Sayin, in his first start as a Buckeye, wins the Offensive Player of the Week, and then Tim Thomas, Fresno State linebacker, wins it defensively. So that brings us into week 1, and this is where most teams are making their season debuts, and we've got quite the lineup of games. Texas heads to the Shoe to face off against Ohio State. Oregon and Utah, 2 top 10 teams, 2 playoff teams from a year ago. Miami and Oklahoma as well. That's going to be a big one. But we'll start with South Carolina and Virginia Tech. The Hokies ranked number 9 coming into the year. That always felt too high, and that proved to be the case as the young man who stole the show today, South Carolina true freshman quarterback Corin LaRoque. 5 touchdowns. Gamecocks win at 38-28. With Lenoris Sellers' surprise transfer to Clemson, Corin LaRoque, the true freshman, thrusted into the lineup, and he was terrific in his first game. Davy Belfort, the freshman for Virginia Tech, not quite as impressive. Miami, the reigning ACC champions, face off against Oklahoma. The Sooners, one of the few top teams with a returning quarterback from a year ago, but it's Miami who ends up winning this game 27-21 in the first start of the Reese Poffenbarger era. Oklahoma actually does not move in the rankings, though, despite losing, which doesn't really make any sense, but okay. Both offenses were fairly mediocre in this game. Poffenbarger wasn't all that impressive, but the defense was. Jackson Arnold really was not all that good. Gavin Sawchuk is supposed to be one of the top running backs in the nation. He cannot be getting the ball 8 times, and likewise, he cannot be averaging 2.6 yards a carry. ECU facing off against NC State. Another upset here as the Pirates, led by running back Javius Bond, end up winning this game 14-11. Another low-scoring defensive battle, and if there's one thing that we've learned here in week 1, I think around 80% of the offenses in the country are really bad this year. Caden Hauser, the quarterback for ECU, one of the top Group 5 quarterbacks, had a strong performance. If you remember last year, NC State started off the year really rocky. Then they got hot, made the ACC championship, almost beat Miami in that game. But they also did that with a veteran quarterback, Grayson McCall. He's gone. And there's going to be a lot more growing pains with sophomore CJ Bailey. All right, here's the big one. Number 4, Texas. Number 3, Ohio State. 2 highly regarded young quarterbacks. And it was Julian Sayin who outplayed Arch Manning. Ohio State defeats the Longhorns here in the Shoe 35-21 with a crazy good game from Julian Sayin. Through 2 weeks, he looks like the real deal. And if Sayin can play at this level, Ohio State probably is the favorite to win the national title. Arch Manning finally makes his first start as a Longhorn. He was pretty good, but ultimately it's not enough as Ohio State gets the win over Texas. The Longhorns' rival, Texas A&M, looking not for the same fate as they face off against UTSA here at Kyle Field, and we would get another surprising Week 1 upset. Some fireworks early on this season as UTSA knocks off the Aggies 21-20. A major wake-up call for Texas A&M, blowing a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter. This team was supposed to be poised for a title run with Connor Wigman returning at quarterback. Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens, maybe the top backfield in the country. Nick Scorton, a projected top 3 pick, returning to Texas A&M. And none of those guys showed up. It's week 1. I still really believe in this team, but that is an ugly start. Ole Miss heads to the Coliseum facing off against the USC team who has to win after their embarrassing loss last week. And they'll look to right the ship as they do ultimately defeat Ole Miss in what ended up being an interesting game. Ole Miss was shut out through 3 quarters, made it interesting late. But USC still gets the job done, although Austin Simmons really improved as the game went along. Now the problem is they could not run the ball at all. Bear Alexander, the senior defensive tackle, had those guys in hell on the ground. As for Miller Moss, I've been underwhelmed through 2 games, but he did enough to lead them to the win over a ranked opponent, so you can't really fault him for this game specifically. Utah heads to Eugene, facing off against the Oregon Ducks. The Dante Moore era begins now as he connects with the All-American Evan Stewart for the touchdown. Oregon wins this game 21-10. They remain number 1 as they beat the Utes. Oregon was the best team in the country last year, and I don't think it was particularly close, but they lost pretty much all of their key players. I believe in Dante Moore, but I have a hard time thinking this team will be as good as they were a year ago. Certainly nice that Evan Stewart returns, but a lot of their key players now in the NFL. Alabama facing off against Florida State, two of the most disappointing teams in the country last year. One of them is going to have to win this game. With two new quarterbacks at the helm, I'm curious to see how these offenses look. And both quarterbacks played quite well, but it was Luke Kromenhoek, the sophomore, who leads FSU to the win over Alabama. If you're looking for a bright spot for the Crimson Tide, Ty Simpson played pretty well. The problem is the rest of the team did not. And with the large exodus of transfers in the offseason, including star linebacker Deontay Lawson, who's now at Florida State, the Kalen DeBoer era has just gotten off to a horrific start. And with the standard and expectations held of being the head football coach at the University of Alabama, DeBoer's seat could get warm fast if he doesn't get things together. Notre Dame faces off against Boston College. The Irish coming off a shaky Week 1 win against Syracuse. That team looked fraudulent in their first game against the Orange, and that was the case today. But unfortunately for Notre Dame, they couldn't pull out the win, despite a very impressive fourth quarter, outscoring Boston College 22-0, but it was not enough. Thomas Castellanos had a terrific senior debut, while Steve Angeli was better, but still not great. And if he doesn't play well, I would not be surprised to see C.J. Carr thrusted into the starting lineup. And last but not least, LSU and Clemson, two very talented senior quarterbacks. Garrett Nussmeier against Cade Klubnik. This ended up being a really good game. LSU looks a lot better than they did last year, but it's Clemson who wins a close one, 26-24, with a solid but not great game from Cade Klubnik, who, of course, is at the top of the conversation to be QB1 in this year's draft. And, of course, we'll get a closer look at him in Week 4 when Kansas heads to Death Valley to face off against the Tigers. As for LSU, Garrett Nussmeier as well was not bad, but he wasn't great either. LSU, of course, finished under 500 last year, but I thought they played fairly well in this game, showing some optimism that this year will be better. Looking at some other scores, Minnesota beats Buffalo. I have no clue how they're ranked in the top 15, but okay. The back-to-back national champions, Michigan, defeats New Mexico. Rutgers squeaks away from Ohio. Kentucky beats Toledo. Iowa State throttles Florida. Could be another rough year for the Gators. And our conference did really well, playing against some SEC and Big Ten opponents, and we held up really well. Baylor blows out Auburn. Colorado beats Georgia Tech. Of course, the Iowa State win, I think, is a big deal. TCU blows out UNC. Great showing for the Big 12, and of course, we had to kind of drag it down. Some other notable results across the rest of the country. Some more fallers include Indiana. They ended up losing to Old Dominion. Michigan State loses to Western Michigan. Similar to Kalen DeBoer, I think Jonathan Smith at Michigan State is another coach who could be on the hot seat sooner rather than later if he does not get it together. So let's take a look at the rankings. We're going to see a lot of movement here for a lot of teams, and that ended up being the case. The top largely stays the same, but a bunch of teams go up a lot of spots. SMU up 6, Oklahoma State up 6. Those two didn't even play. Clemson up 6, Rutgers up 6. Those two barely won. Texas drops a lot, Utah drops a lot, Oklahoma doesn't move for God knows what reason. If you're going to drop Texas and Utah, which you should, Oklahoma should move down as well. UCF, Minnesota, Iowa, Kentucky, they all go up a lot. Iowa didn't even play. Houston is ranked, again, for God knows what reason. On one hand, I get that we're number 21. We probably shouldn't be much higher than that. But on the other hand, there are some bad teams ahead of us. Couple of Georgia boys here for Player of the Week. Dylan Bell, the Georgia receiver, and Victorine Brown, the pass rusher of Georgia State. That'll bring us into Week 2. The notable matchups include Oklahoma State and Oregon, the Ducks, with a really hard schedule early in the year. Michigan against Oklahoma. The Sooners starting the year off with Miami, and then Michigan. Miami has a tough game as well. They're facing off against Notre Dame. As for us, the border war is back as we head to Missouri, facing off against the Tigers, who have not yet played this season. This will be their opening game. Should be a fun one, renewing this rivalry, which hasn't been seen in quite a while. The Jayhawks look to right the ship after their Week 1 upset. We'll see if we can get the job done against Mizzou. Hope everybody enjoyed the episode. Obviously not the result in Week 0 that we hoped for, but nonetheless, still a fun one. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.